So, being on the market. So, we've talked about the pros and cons of a high street agent versus an online agent. Being on the market. So, we're actually on the market. What are the tips for sellers? There are things that you can do to ensure to give your property the best chance of success. Ensure the property is decluttered as much as possible. If you've got kids and children, we don't want it to be a clinic. It still must look like a family home. But obviously, even from a health and safety point of view, ensure the property is decluttered as much as possible. Another tip that I'll give you is don't show rooms as being multi-purpose, i.e. don't turn dining rooms into bedrooms or bedrooms into storerooms or vice versa. It sends a confusing message out to the marketplace, and I think you've got to just assume that, and I'm a great believer in what they call the art of non-resistance. You don't want to be confusing the buyer or the potential buyer when they walk around. If your property is being marketed as a 3-bedroom, but actually it's because your 4th bedroom is being used as another kind of living area, they're marketed as a 4-bedroom. And then obviously point out, or your agent could point out to any potential buyer that if they wanted another living space and they didn't really need 4, then they can always commandeer one of the rooms as a first floor living room, for example. But don't reduce or confuse the amount of rooms or show rooms not being, don't show dining rooms as bedrooms. The amount of times that I saw, beautiful Victorian houses, and I would see these lovely double reception rooms, and I'd see, the second half of that reception room being shut off and being used as a bedroom because maybe, the seller was renting it out to students or had another person renting out a bedroom. It's not the right way to get the best value for your home. At the time you come to sell, make sure the rooms are being shown as the rooms that they are meant to be. Okay? Nobody knows your property better than you. Provide as much historical or interesting facts as possible to your agents. Okay? So quite often I find a testimony of why somebody has enjoyed living in a certain property so much quite helpful, why they've loved living in a certain road very helpful. Nobody knows your property better than you. If there are interesting things that, your property could have some a story about its heritage, it could be a blue plaque building, it could be of historical significance. Make sure that your agent is aware of all these facets. Provide as much of these interesting facts as possible, and your agent should be happy to talk about them, to learn them, and to communicate them. Okay, make sure the exterior of the property looks nice and presentable. We call this curb appeal. So I would say to you this: if you've got a property that is in need of a bit of TLC, do what you can to prioritise the exterior first. And that means, if there's some shoddy looking brickwork, maybe get some repointing done. If there's a door or window frame that needs to be repainted, make sure that's done, because you want to give people the very best first impression. And I can tell you that people get into a very positive frame of mind within the first 30 seconds of pulling up to a property. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is to make sure that your curb appeal is presentable. All right, try not to be home during the viewings. And I know this is a bit of a bugbear for a lot of potential sellers. So we'll say, well, look, I want to be here. I want to hear what people are saying about my property, and I want to be secure. I want to make sure that nothing happens while I'm out. That's fine, but I think, again, if you trust your agent, you should trust your agent to represent you and look after the property at all times. That means making sure they chaperone all viewings. The reason I do tend to advise my clients not to be home during viewings is that buyers tend to pay lip service to homeowners, especially when they're home, and the feedback isn't genuine. So the amount of times where, because people generally have a disposition to be polite, right? I mean, nobody wants to come into somebody's home and start, kicking the crap out of it. People want to be polite. And, quite often I've heard when my clients are home, this is really nice and it's a lovely kitchen or really nice bathroom, or you have a nice home. Great. And obviously the seller gets left with a very positive impression. All of a sudden they're on the phone the next day wondering, where their asking price offer is. It doesn't actually work that way. And I think the job of an agent is to obtain what I call genuine feedback from a buyer. And a buyer will always be more honest and natural and open with the agent if they don't feel they're at risk of hurting the feelings of the homeowner, because obviously nobody really wants to do that. So I would always say, help the agent to help you by actually not being at home during viewings. Now, look, some people work from home, sometimes it's unavoidable. Fine, try to sort of keep to one area of the house and let your agent walk around and chaperone your view around, so the viewer can actually start to deliver genuine feedback, and your agent can be asking valuable questions to give you the best possible feedback and the best possible insights. Because buyers that are just paying lip service to homeowners just because they're home doesn't do you, the seller, or me, the agent, any favors whatsoever. We want to drill down into the crux of what they're feeling. And the best way to do that is to give them comfort and to make them feel relaxed that they're not having to worry about offending the vendor's feelings about the squidgy green carpet upstairs. So, make sure that, you try not to be home during the viewings. It just allows feedback to be more authentic. And I think that's very important. Be flexible with appointments as much as possible. I know for those with busy lifestyles, or those who work from home, or those who have children, it's not always possible. Sometimes, kids need to be in bed by a certain time. There are meal times, there's bath times, there's family times, there's appointments for those that work from home. We understand that. So try to be as flexible as you can with appointments. Quite often we've taken on, not only a speculative, unmotivated vendor who wants to sell for a very high price, but if they're only allowing you to view the properties on Tuesdays and Thursdays between 11 and 12, and then Thursdays again between 2 and 3, it's a very narrow window in which to be available. And of course, again, the best results in business are practiced via the art of non-resistance. By being non-resistant to the demand of the marketplace, we allow the process to unfold as quickly, as efficiently as it needs to. Okay. I would have your seller's pack available. Now, what is your seller's pack? As a seller, you are required to provide what's called a seller's information pack to your potential buyer. Now, years ago, we used to have the dreadful home information pack, which thank God has now fallen by the wayside. But it does mean that you are still obliged to fill out things like a property information questionnaire, a fixture and fittings form. Your buyer will obviously need to have copies of the lease, any service charges if you're living in a flat that's managed by agents or an individual separate freeholder. You can save a lot of time in the legal process by actually, once you've made the decision to sell, appoint a solicitor and ask them to pull your seller's pack together for you, so that as soon as your agent identifies a buyer at a price that you're happy to accept, you're no longer waiting 2 or so weeks to get this information back to your solicitor. Your solicitor has it ready, and I think if you are time pressured, or time is getting on, or time is of the essence, I think this is an invaluable piece of advice. Have your seller's pack ready almost from the point that you've decided that you're going to sell. This will save you a lot of time when you accept an offer, and then you appoint a solicitor, and then you've got to fill out all the protocol forms, get the disbursements back to your solicitor, and so on. If you have all of that in place, your contract can be issued almost immediately, and this saves a lot of time. So for those looking to be efficient with their selling campaign, have your seller's pack available. And, if you're on the market, ask for regular feedback. And as I mentioned, you're the client. You shouldn't have to. A good agent should be reporting back to you, almost on a daily basis as to what's going on. I like a kind of check-in with my clients at least twice a week, even if nothing's going on, letting them know what we're doing, what's happening, what our thoughts are about the marketplace, asking them if their situation has changed. Is there anything else we need to be doing? And just getting a general feeling for the kind of motivation or the relaxation levels of our client. You must have regular feedback, and agents who do not give regular feedback have no right to call themselves agents. It's part of the service commitment to you as a client. It's what you're paying your fee for. You shouldn't have to ask what is happening with my property. And again, if you're finding yourself having to pick up the phone asking these questions, it's probably time to reassess your agency relationship. So there you go, tips for being on the market. I think all of those, because there's not much else you can do. You can't pick the house up and move it somewhere else. You can't force a certain price to be paid. The things that you can do are going to basically help the estate agent do their job for you the best way it should be done. So these things: ensuring the property is decluttered, don't show rooms as being multi-purpose, provide as much historical or interesting facts as possible to your agent about your home, make sure the exterior of the property looks as nice as possible, try not to be home during viewings. I mean, nobody likes being kicked out of their own home, but believe you me, you do want your feedback to be authentic and genuine, and not buyers just walking around telling you what a lovely bathroom you've got when actually they hate it. It's not the feedback we want. Be flexible with appointments as much as possible. If you want to give your agent a schedule to stick to, that's fine. But obviously understand, if your agent is dealing with a busy marketplace, we want to be flexible and we want to have an ease of access wherever possible, especially at weekends, for example. So have your seller's pack available for a new buyer ASAP. Be efficient, get organised. If you've decided to sell, get the legalities out of the way. Have your seller's pack ready so that once you accept an offer, your contract is away and your seller's solicitor can get on with raising requisite inquiries. And we'll talk a little bit more about that process a bit later. And ask for regular feedback. Without that feedback, you don't know how the market's responding to your property. And it's that feedback really which determines the success and ultimately the price that we're going to achieve. So your agent must be providing you feedback at all times. Okay? So, negotiating an offer. So, the fun part. We're on the market. People are seeing our property. So, what factors need to be present for an offer to be acceptable to us? You know, what needs to be present for an offer to be acceptable? Obviously, they need to be financially satisfactory. We're going to take an offer, hopefully, that we know, we're never going to want to cajole our clients to take an offer that isn't financially acceptable, and no agent should ever put you under duress. At the end of the day, between the process that you've already gone through with your agent, you should understand the prices in which an offer will be acceptable, and under those circumstances, if an offer presents itself which is acceptable, then we should consider that satisfactory. We also want to know, can the buyer legally and financially proceed? Now, can the buyer legally and financially proceed? It's all very well getting an offer, but we want an offer that's proceedable. In other words, the buyer has finances lined up. The buyer can actually get a mortgage. The buyer doesn't have another property that they need to sell first in order to proceed with this purchase. And again, this is down to your agent and down to the amount of pre-qualifying that they do with their buyers. Sometimes it just happens that buyers start looking before they're in a position to make offers. But again, your agent should be advising you accordingly of the merits of accepting an offer from a buyer with those constraints. So we want to know, can the buyer legally and financially proceed? Does the agent recommend the offer? And I think this is a very, very good question for you as a seller to ask any agent. If an agent came to you with an offer and they put it forward, the first thing I'd ask them is this an offer you would recommend? And it's interesting to hear the responses sometimes. And I think the best agents will give you a very genuine response. There's many a times that I've recommended a client do not accept an offer on the basis that I feel the marketing campaign had more momentum to run. I felt we could do better. I felt there were possibilities further down the line that would be of greater interest to us. And if I really understood my marketplace, I would have the confidence to actually say to my client, no, this is an offer I wouldn't recommend. Or if I had certain reservations about the buyer's position, about their ability to gain finance, if I hadn't received necessary assurances from financial brokers, about the levels of financing required and the ability of the buyer to leverage it. These are all factors that your agent should be getting for you at the time when they're qualifying offers. Okay. Has the property been extensively marketed? So if we're on the market, for one day and we get an offer at the asking price, do we necessarily need to accept it? I don't think so. I think, the job of an agent is to flush out the very maximum that the property is worth over, a concentrated period of marketing. And if we're hitting a certain price after one day, then I'm sure you're expecting more than one day of marketing from your estate agent to sell your property. So I think, again, your agent has to manage the campaign in a way where, if the property hasn't been extensively marketed, that they are managing expectations with their marketplace. And again, this can come back to, communicating prices, guide prices. It could be a fact that the estate agent comes back to you after a couple of days and says, look, it looks as if we're getting a lot of interest at this level. What I suggest is perhaps prolonging the campaign so that the market gets to see the property, and then inviting tenders or sealed bids by a certain date. So again, if the property hasn't been extensively marketed, there should be strategies that your agent is advising you as to what you can do to make sure you get that best price. But if the property has been extensively marketed, then again, through the process of feedback that hopefully we've received, you should be very familiar now with what is considered a good offer and what is considered a not so good offer. So again, for me, this factor needs to be present. Has the property been adequately marketed? And, the million-dollar question is, has the feedback that's been obtained suggest that the offer is reflective of the maximum the market is willing to pay? And that is just an evolvement process throughout the marketing campaign. If we reach a stage where our property has been on the market for £450,000, it's been on the market at that level for 5 weeks, we've had a good amount of viewings through the door, we've had some decent feedback, but we've had no offers, then if we receive an offer at, let's say, £440,000, in context, we've got to look at that as a fairly favourable and strong offer. So the feedback of the marketing campaign will give you, the seller, context in which to judge if offers are good or if offers are not so good. Okay, so those factors for me all need to be present when negotiating an offer, and certainly your agent needs to have made those very clear. So accepting an offer, at what point during the marketing campaign should an offer be accepted by a seller? When do you draw the line and say, okay, I'm out, that's good enough for me, that works? So an offer should be acceptable if it's at a price that the seller is willing to accept. I know that sounds fairly straightforward, but nobody, in my experience, ever accepted a price that they didn't really want to accept. So it should always be at a price that the seller is willing to accept. In my opinion, it should always be if the property has been properly marketed. I just believe in working for my clients. I don't believe that doing an open house, for example, over an afternoon, or having the property on for one day and showing it to one buyer who offers the asking price, then deems it as job done. I think that's where the job just begins. And I think the property needs to be properly marketed so that the best representation of the marketplace gets to see it. So I can be happy that as a seller, the price that I eventually get to is certainly the best price. If the property is worth, at the beginning of the campaign, if the market's only ever going to pay £450,000 for it, you're going to find that out in 1 day, 1 week, 2 weeks, or 3 weeks. But if it's worth possibly £460,000 and you take £450,000 after 1 day, you're never going to know. So for me, the property needs to be properly marketed. And that means there's been a healthy number of viewings. Okay, so when I see properly marketed, it also means that the agent has shown the property to enough, a sampling of enough buyers that has given us feedback and analytics that the agent can put into context whether an offer is a good one or a bad one. Okay, so an offer should also be accepted if the feedback provided by the agent does suggest that the offer is a good one. So again, we're sort of dealing a little bit with the dynamics of the marketing period. Has there been enough of a marketing period? Have enough people seen my property? Have there been better offers than this in the past, which suggests that this one is a little bit unfavourable? Or with all the information that I've had to hand over my marketing period thus far, does the offer presented seem a good one? And if the answer is yes, then certainly it's one that you should accept. If it enables you as the seller to complete your objective, i.e. if it enables you to move house, if it enables you to reinvest somewhere else, if it enables you to relocate to that new job, sometimes these variables or these needs may be given priority over extrapolating that extra bit of premium. So, I've always said to potential clients, if the offer enables you to achieve your immediate and what I call your priority objectives, then it's an offer you should accept. And I think, again, it comes back to understanding, an agent understanding really as to the merits of that marketing campaign and the motivation of what's driving the actual sale. Okay, so the dream scenario is that we can end up with multiple offers. So when we're presented with multiple offers, and we come back to that scenario before about the best way to extrapolate multiple offers is by making our window to the marketplace as big as it can be. Okay, and that means for me making sure that we're not overpitched in terms of price, making sure the best buyers are through the door, making sure that we're not missing our target market, especially online. But when presented with multiple offers, how best to ensure that the best price is obtained? And there are a number of things that we can do as agents. So the one that's most common is sealed bids. And sealed bids means basically where you invite all of the people that have made an offer, whether it be 2, whether it be 10, to submit what they call their best bid, which will be kept in confidence and opened in confidence at a certain point in the future. Now, the thing with sealed bids is that they can be, people don't like them. People don't like being involved in that kind of auction process. They don't like the uncertainty. And quite often, people are free to keep resubmitting bids. So quite often, a bad agent will not be able to extrapolate the best possible price. So the advice that I've always said to people say, well, what should I bid? And this is where I get a bit, I can't be of much help. I say, well, look, with everything in life, things have a maximum value to us. And if you're ever presented with a scenario where you have to make a sealed bid as a buyer, you should always pay the very maximum amount, or you should offer the very maximum amount that you are willing to pay for that property. And quite often people kind of don't do that because they feel, well, okay, well, I'll put this amount, and if there's a higher bid, then maybe I can resubmit my bid. And to be honest, it can be quite an efficient process for an agent to actually identify the maximum price the market is willing to pay in a competitive situation. The one I really like, when I am faced with a situation as an agent where I have multiple people wanting to offer on the property, I like a bid by tender. And that basically means that I'm going to invite offers by tender. And when you invite offers by tender, it's much more definitive. And we give a clear indication to our marketplace to say, this is it. The deadline is set for, you can set the day for whatever you need it to be and the time. But this is the deadline. And we're inviting you to make a once and once only bid by tender to buy this property. Now, quite often in my experience, you will find that because people are aware that unlike sealed bids, that they can revise and resubmit a new bid, a bid by tender doesn't allow you to do that. It's almost like a one chance hit. You get one chance, one opportunity, give me the best price possible. The biggest price that you're willing to pay, the price that you have in your mind that you will go to buy this property. That's the figure I need. That's the figure you should offer. So that's the kind of tool for negotiating, really, in my opinion, that a seller you always want to be. Sealed bids, yeah, it can be great. It can be engineered after a couple of days, but it doesn't really give you that closure. The other thing I like about a bid by tender campaign is that people who see the property after it's only been on the market for, let's say, a couple of days, let's say if it's a really sought after 3-bedroom garden flat in, somewhere like Islington, where there's going to be high demand for it in a period building. Let's say it's on the market after a couple of days, it's got offers. People have offered on it. It's, straight away the agent can't wait to sort of engineer a sealed bids process. But they're only engineering that sealed bids process between a very small sampling of people. So we come back to this period of marketing. If the property's only been marketed for a couple of days, why not revert to a bid by tender process? Say, look, we're not looking to accept any offers on this property until 14 days' time. So here's the deadline. You will be given the opportunity to bid by tender. And with that, it's a one-off. You must give us the very best price you're willing to pay. What that really allows, it allows for a concentrated period of marketing. It allows time for people that are interested in the property to finalise their financial arrangements. It allows them to almost get all their ducks in a row to present their offer in the very best way. So it sort of kills a number of birds for you. It allows you to have an elongated period of marketing where you're exposing the property to the best possible marketplace. You're allowing the marketplace to return to you their very best bid because they know they won't have an opportunity to do so. The bid by tender legally also means that we are going to accept on an exclusive basis one of these offers. There'll be no further negotiation. So by the agents making that very clear to all interested parties, you get a very much more definitive result. And it also allows you to be confident that at the end of that process, certainly the prices being paid are certainly reflective of the best the market's willing to offer. Much more so than engineering this process or rushing into a sealed bids process with your agent just because the property's been on the market a couple of days and there's 2 asking price offers on the table. Again, these things are time sensitive, but your agent should be managing expectations adequately. I've experienced many a time where I've basically had numerous people bidding on a property literally within 24 hours. My immediate advice then to my client is to revert to a bid by tender process where we don't accept any offers for the next 10 days. We allow the property to be marketed. We allow bids to be properly considered. And this is the other thing I want to just mention on this, guys, is that I'd much rather recommend an offer to my client from someone that's had 10 to 14 days to research everything they need to do to get their mortgage principal in, their agreements for their mortgage in place, to instruct a solicitor, to maybe even have a survey, a building survey done on the property. So it allows us time for that buyer to become really motivated and proactive. And I would feel much more comforted that at the end of the bid by tender deadline, that the original buyer is still there, they've done their research, because I know they have high motivation to buy. Whereas the sealed bids process can be very reactive and very emotional, especially at open houses. Why the fall through rates at open houses are through the roof, and why I particularly don't believe in them, even though my company is called Open House. We are an open house in a different kind of way. I don't believe in the actual traditional open house concept. I don't believe it's the best way to offer our clients the best possible value. Who wants, why would you want to sell your asset in one afternoon? It doesn't make sense. We have the Dutch auction, whereby really bad agents are disclosing the levels of, someone else's bid to other agents. So, to be honest, for me, I'm not really a big fan of that. I think, if somebody would have paid 480,000 on a bid by tender process, but they're told that the best bid they have on the table is 460,000. Now, all of a sudden, you've capped that. Your agent has capped that price for you at something like 461,000, right? So, You never want to be disclosing the levels of anyone's bid as an agent. It's actually unethical. It goes against National Association of Estate Agents best practice. It's undesirable practice, and it doesn't actually protect you as the client. You might think, well, if somebody's offered 460, tell them to offer 461. It doesn't actually work to get you the best price. The best way to get you the best price is to actually say, look, we've got an offer that's acceptable. You've got to give us the best possible price you're willing to pay. And, needless to say, if you guys are out there buying somewhere, the last thing I'm sure you want is for your agent to be passing on details of what you're offering on a property to someone else, so that you can just be gazumped. So again, there's so many reasons to why this kind of Dutch auction, which you normally find at Dutch auctions, are not really commonplace with good agency practice. The knockout bid is an interesting one, and what I say about the knockout bid, again, it comes down to how confident and good your agent is. So we've got our property, it's on the market, it's been on the market a couple of days, or it's been on the market one day. And let's say it's got a guide price at £500,000. And we bring in a very good prospect who, really likes the property and says, okay, Nick, I'll offer, the guide price or the asking price of £500,000. I think it all depends on what the agent actually knows. If the agent knows that they have another 10 people to show this property to over the next 24 hours, what do you think that, what would you want that agent to be saying? I certainly wouldn't want my agent to be saying, oh, great, thanks very much. It sounds great. Okay, well, let me see if I can get it agreed for you. I think that's really bad. But it's amazing how many agents are what I call deal orientated as opposed to being client orientated. If I knew that I had a queue of people waiting to see it, and if I knew that the market had responded favourably to the price point, I'd be saying to my buyer, between you, me and the goalpost, I don't think you've got any chance of securing this property right now at this price. The reason being, we've had a fantastic response. The market has certainly responded favourably to the price. I think we're going to clearly exceed it. I've already got 10 people that are due to see it within the next 24 hours. I think it's very unlikely that I could recommend even a guide price bid at this stage. And I think, it's basically what I would want to hear from my agent. And that will elicit a certain response. It's designed to be proactive. A knockout bid is designed to be proactive and attractive to you, the client. And I know that if I'm a buyer and I've looked at this at 500 and I've not seen any better flat or house up to, let's say, £520,000, then what do we think is the relative value of that particular property? All of a sudden, I think it becomes £520,000. So the agent doesn't quite know that this is what's going on in a buyer's head, but a buyer who really wants this house and who doesn't want to be enveloped into a competitive situation. In other words, they pay for the right to basically take this property off the market without being entered into a competitive situation with other buyers. And to do that, we need them to present a knockout bid. So the conversation might go like, look, at this stage, the property's received a hefty amount of interest. We've got loads of people lined up to see it. It clearly looks as if we're going to achieve this price quite easily. This is probably going to sell for more money. At this stage, even a guide price bid, I can tell you I wouldn't be able to recommend that to my client. I think we're going to do better. So the buyer is either going to say to you, well, okay, so, what do you think it will take to get the property off the market right now? Or they'll say, well, look, I don't really want to be drawn down that prospect, so, I'll kind of just back out altogether. Or 3, look, I'll be involved in the process. I'll register my interest. Please keep me posted. The people that like the property the most will often want to know what's needed to take the property off the market right now. And this is where your agent can really go for the jugular. And I would say, look, I would just have to ask you if there's a price in your mind as to a maximum that you would offer right here, right now. I suggest you give it to me and I'll put it forward to my client. And again, That's the only way that we're going to uncover whether or not our buyer thinks the property is worth only £500,000, or whether or not, from a relative value theory, it's worth £520,000. Because I can bet your bottom dollar, if he thinks that this is the best property he's seen, up to £520,000, he will say, okay, my offer is £520,000, but it's designed to be a knockout bid. I want it accepted, I want an exclusivity clause, and I want it off the market. Now, you've already accelerated the seal bids process. I think that's a point you can go back to your client and say, look, I've got a very attractive proposal for you. This is the offer. It's £520,000. It's £20,000 more than our guide price. It's from a very proactive, proceedable buyer. All his finances approved. They've put their best foot forward. I think it's a strong offer and worth considering even this early in the game. Because obviously we could still go through the whole process of sealed bids or bid by tender, and we might only get to £520,000 anyway. But I think knockout bids under this scenario are just as attractive, and sometimes, where the really, really best premiums are paid for those actually scared that they don't want to involve themselves in a competitive situation, and actually not so much because of the money, but because they know they actually run the risk of losing maybe a property that they really, really want to buy. Okay, so I hope that all makes sense. And of course, we've got the competing bid scenario, which is usually just one or more, two different bids, not necessarily sealed bids. This is a bit easier to manage, where we've got two buyers just competing. Again, just by asking them to disclose full and final bids in confidence is a good way to get to a full or the best price. But for me, I think two bids, two processes stand out for me here: bid by tender and the knockout bid. For those wanting to be proactive, the knockout bid certainly offers that scenario and can actually often yield in a better price than you'd probably get from a bid by tender or a sealed bid scenario, because you know that the person making the knockout bid is what we call highly motivated. So I hope that all makes sense.